Hi, I'm Alec from Ease Your Habits, and I coach overthinking entrepreneurs and high performers in how to turn that analysis paralysis and procrastination into unstoppable execution. So today I'm going to go over the key to overcoming social anxiety and overthinking in a network context or a conference context, right? If you're networking, a meeting where you want to go out and meet more people, but you find the questions like who to talk to and what to talk about overwhelming because there's so much going on. All right, I'll dive into that. So I recently went to a conference and I know exactly how panicked I can start to feel when the last speaker signs off and I'm furiously scribbling notes, loved listening and absorbing all the information, but now people are milling around and I want to talk to people. That's part of the whole reason I'm there, is to connect. But at the same time, the choice of who to talk to and what to talk about can be overwhelming. In addition to, at this particular conference, right, they took a page out of Tony Robbins' book. So that meant like loud music. Are you pumped up? You're clapping. They actually try and pump you up for the speaker, so they have you clap. And if you're kind of more on the introvert scale, that feels awkward. So you've been kind of doing these things that feel socially awkward to you all day. And then all of a sudden you have this big, complex, ambiguous problem of who to talk to and what to talk about. And what happens to me when I'm in that space is not that other people can tell that I'm nervous, but that awkwardness takes me out of the moment. So I don't connect as much with the people I am talking to. The quality of those conversations goes down, and the quality of the connection after the conference goes down. And also, it's so stressful overthinking who to talk to all the time that, especially at the end of the day, I'm tempted to like run back into my hotel room and hide, which there are pros and cons to that, and we'll get to that. But the big secret to dealing with your overthinking, right, your overanalysis, especially in a network context where you know you do want to talk to people, but it's also going to be chaotic and overwhelming, is to use your overthinking ahead of time to create routines for you to do. All right. So you're going to translate your overthinking ahead of time into physical actions that you can take so you can focus on what to do at the conference. And a lot of those actions will be things that are not aimed at thinking through things, trying to control things with your brain. That's your problem if you're overthinking, right? That you feel there's a lot of uncertainty and you need to control it by thinking through all the possible outcomes and all the possible things to do, right? That's your problem right there, because when there are so many possible things to do in a conference setting, that is exactly what gets you stressed and overwhelmed, pulls you out of the moment and away from having conversation. The key here is overthink ahead of time, but focus not on what you're going to say specifically, but what you're going to do every day during the conference to make those connections easier, to have more energy, etc., to be calm, etc. So great, that's the key. What does that look like? Well, I recently went to a conference and I tested a lot of things, some that worked really well, some that were kind of ridiculous and sort of worked, and some that just didn't work so well. And so I will show you what I did at a conference to overthink it and which of my conference hacks resulted in the best outcomes for me. So one of the first things I overthought before the conference was how to not only have more conversations, but to have conversations with people who have the same interest, right? Because that's one of the problems. I do know how to do small talk. I can relate to a lot of people. That's not my problem. All right, my problem is that I'm overstimulated. I don't know who to talk to. And rather than just only talking to people who are right next to me and talking about whatever, which they tend to be random conversations, I would love to have more conversations where I share an interest with the person I'm talking to. Those were far and away the best and most interesting and easiest to follow up conversations that I had networking. And so while I thought about this project, I thought, well, what if I advertise my interests, right? What if people could see, just looking at me, what my interests were and come up to me and ask me about them? So I did this in the form of pins. I had one pin that said, "Hi, I'm Alec." Another pin that said, "Ask me about." And I had a whole bunch of pins with my interests on it. And I actually A/B tested this. I am like a laboratory of weird habits. So I did one day, the first 24 hours of the conference, where I had, hi, I'm Alec, ask me about, and I had like 5 or 6 pins with all my various interests. Now, people did come up to me, about as many people as came up to me in condition B the next day. But when people came up to me when I had 5 or 6 pins, they asked me about the pins in general. I think one person asked me specifically about one of them. And a couple people made comments like, I don't know how those all fit together. Or I think one person said, do those all have to do with your business? Good luck with that, right? And so it's not like it didn't work having all of those interests, but I was kind of curious, like, would I get people coming up to me with, like, I had a pin that said Austin. Would I find people from Austin with one of those pins? And would I, have someone else ask me about VR or someone else ask me about habits? Really didn't happen. It was too overwhelming. People didn't take them in. They just noticed that I had the pins and that they seemed to invite a conversation. So they came up and talked to me about whatever. And those were kind of random conversations. Now, the condition number 2, the next day, is that I had only one pin. And it was the conversation I wanted to drive the most of the conference was about my VR project. I wanted to kind of user test that, pitch that idea to a lot of different people and see how they react. So when I had 3 pins, right? Hi, I'm Alec, ask me about, and VR, and that's it, right? People came up to me, and they came up to me only for VR. There were more people that actually talked to me about my interests when I had one than when I had like half a dozen pins, right? And I already knew this going into it, but it's still good to reaffirm it from time to time, that it is much more effective to be known for one thing. If you go to a conference, pick the one thing you want to be known for, and if it's being the VR launching project guy, all right, really drive home that. Don't distract from that. Now, there's probably a few ways I could have signaled other things. Like, I do want to meet more content creators and people in Austin, so I could have worn like an Austin hat or something. But at least with the pins, I would, or potentially as a t-shirt, for example, you could say, hey, I'm starting a VR company, ask me about it, or something cooler than that, but put it on a t-shirt, right? Anyway, have one thing for that, and then you could have some other cues maybe people would follow. But even then, you wouldn't want to have too many. So that was one thing that I overthought, right? I thought about the problem, and I thought about it so much harder than most people who are like, I wonder who I'm going to talk to. Just guess it's who's ever next to me, right? I overthought the problem, but instead of that being a problem, I turned it into a superpower. So I would say out of the 20 or 25 in-depth conversations I had over the course of 2 days, it's not just like the high-end passing, but I got their name, what they're doing, maybe some of their challenges, current challenges, or things they're excited about, shared what I was doing, etc. Those conversations. About 5 to 7, so like a quarter to a third, potentially, of those conversations were people coming up to me and asking me about my interests. Obviously much more effective the second day, but it was actually about the same number of people, like 3 or 4 people. So maybe it was more like 6 to 8. Anyway, that was very powerful for a couple of reasons. One, I had more conversations about what I was interested in. So I had more connections that I really wanted to keep up with and wanted to keep up with me after the conference. But the other thing too, if you are an overthinker like me and you're overstimulated in this setting, having people come up to you instead of you having to decide who to talk to, that took a lot off my plate. I was doing a third to a quarter less thinking about who to talk to. So that lowered the amount I needed to overthink. And it's not something I had to think about during the conference, right? So that was how I overthought ahead of time and had an action. I just wore those pins. It was just passive. I just wore those pins. And then people would come up to me. And so not only am I going to use this pin idea in my next conference, actually my wife is going to a conference this weekend and she'll be using it. Unfortunately, she has some spine issues, so she has to go in a neck brace. And she's trying to figure out how to make that less noticeable or less awkward. And I told her she should add some bling to it. But ironically, what she's promoting at this conference, it's I think an animation conference. But what she's promoting at this conference is an anime musical of Sleepy Hollow. If you're familiar with the story, it involves a headless ghost. And so I told her she should put the Sleepy Hollow taglines and ads or something like that as pins on her neck brace. And so she's like, the tagline of Sleepy Hollow, our musical thing, is heads will roll. I'm like, that's a perfect thing to put on a neck brace. So a lot of people looking at that will just think that is clever advertising until she tells them, like, no, I actually need this because I am in spine pain right now, unfortunately. But it is a way to turn a liability into an advantage. And that was just kind of a funny situation as we're trying to make the best of a difficult situation where we're taking this pin tip and making it more usable for her specific use case. But have fun with it, right? It might not specifically be pins, might be jacket or shirt or whatever you want to do, patches that you iron on, like whatever it is, make it your own. So the other thing that I tried preparing ahead of time is I wanted to add value to the people I talk to. So I created a card, and one of the things I do here as a coach is help people with habits. And I often start with habits of energy, how to have enough energy to get things done. And so not only did I create a business card with like my name and phone number on one side, actually on the other side, flip it over, I teased a bit about how to have habits of focus. And I had a QR code that went to a landing page that showed people one of the reasons why they don't have enough energy to focus, like what are the mechanisms of biologically of being tired or not alert, etc. And what they can do, habits they can experiment with to fix those problems. So allow them to troubleshoot their own tiredness, right? And I was really excited for this because I wanted to add value. That's something I help people with as a coach. Well, to be honest, this one did not work as well. And I think there's a couple reasons for that, right? There was, in one sense, again, it kind of goes back to what I said with the pins, right? I really wanted to focus on VR. And I also told people that I was a coach for overthinkers, but this was adding like a third area of emphasis, which was like habits of energy. I don't think that gelled with people. And I think there's at least one person who got my card and didn't call me back, probably because they didn't even associate the VR conversation we had with the habits of energy business card, right? And so one, it just would have been more effective if I aligned my business card with the other things I was doing. Now, I don't really regret that very much for a couple of reasons, which is one part of the reason why I went there. I had my priority one thing to pitch the new VR project so I could get a feel for whether that's something people would be excited about. But I also had a bunch of other pitches and I wanted to see what resonated. What I learned was the overthinking bit that when I introduced the coaching side of my business, in addition to the VR, documenting the VR startup side of the business, right? Those both resonated. The focus, the habits of energy, sorry, not habits of focus, habits of energy piece, not as successful. So in that sense, even though it didn't work, the overthinking this and trying out several different approaches has led me to understand a lot better how to reach people, what particular pitches I have resonate most with people. And so the next conference I go to, right, I can have my business card streamlined with my pins, streamlined with my intro, personal intro. I can be very targeted. I could be easily picked out. People can talk to me and I can be remembered as being the VR guy or the coach for overthinkers, etc. So that would be more effective. And even though this overthinking, I don't think worked for me very well at the conference, it definitely gave me the learning I needed to be even better at the next conference. And so that's part of what's going to happen as you overthink, right? As you're overthinking actions you can take that will help you change state and do things more easily. And the business card and the pins are really trying to make it easier for people to talk to and remember you, right? As you do those things, then some of them are going to work, some of them aren't going to work. Approach it like an experiment. And then even the things that don't work will at least help you get towards your next successful conference or networking opportunity. So we're going to dive into the things that really start to change your state, not just make it easier for people to talk to you, but the things I overthought ahead of time so that I was prepared to take action and not overthink at the conference. And one of those is just planning space, right? If you're an introvert, right? If you're an overthinker and the idea of a noisy, crowded conference space and not knowing who to talk to is overwhelming, right? If there's the social anxiety there, All right. It's not about pretending to be someone else. Don't try and pretend to be someone you're not. Allow yourself to be an overthinker and an introvert and prepare space for that. So I did that in a couple different ways. When I bought my ticket, it was a little bit more expensive. Okay, a lot more expensive to stay an extra day at the swanky hotel or an extra day afterward. And that helped me have some quiet before I got into the conference to get into the conference headspace. And that allowed me after the conference to assimilate everything that I'd learned and look through all the people that I talked to and maybe how to best reach out to them. And that was helpful. I had at least two very powerful experiences, one on each day, that helped me really solidify my learning and connections at that conference. And so that extra time was really helpful for me. Of course, while the conference was going, it was like a 2-day conference. I also had some space at the beginning of the day where I would go through a routine and some space at the end of the day where I would recover a bit and relax. And that space was just as critical to help me overcome my social anxiety. In fact, day 2, end of the second day, conference is over. I am walking up towards the apartments and also, or the hotel rooms, and also the checkout desk, and there's someone who's checking out, and I strike up a conversation with them. It's a great conversation, but at this point I am already like oversaturated, like too much loud music, so many conversations, so many ideas flowing through my head. I go up to my apartment, take the elevator to my apartment, and I'm feeling a little bit guilty, like, oh, there's still some people hanging out, I should talk to them. Well, I go to my apartment, I sit down, I go through calming routines that I have. You might have some prayer or meditation, reading a scripture, a poem, a letter from someone you know, just anything that helps you come down from being anxious. Like, bring that with you, or a copy of it with you if you don't want to lose it or whatnot because you're traveling, right? But plan to have some kind of habit like that, a calming habit. So I did that for a few minutes, got it out of my system, and said, all right, I know it's been, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes, but there's probably still some people hanging around. Maybe I will check that out. So I came down, and there were some people there having interesting conversation. I just jumped right in, had a great conversation, loved talking to them. Somebody else even bought me dinner, which was like fantastic. And definitely people that I reached out to, connected with on social media. I had that great interaction because I was already prepared, not only with the space, but the right habits, calming habits to put in that space so that I could come back down, right? And that's the idea. You want those items of space. In this case, I had a Q&A over lunch, so I couldn't retreat during lunch, but that was also a really good time to talk to people, so I wouldn't want to retreat during lunch. But depending on how the conference flows and your own personal needs, you might need some quiet time at lunch so you can get down and really have genuine, fun conversations with people without overthinking. So that is one of the things to overthink ahead of time, is to plan into your schedule space to calm down, unwind, know what you're going to do in those spaces roughly. I didn't actually know 100% what I was going to do the day before. I knew what I was going to do the day after in terms of just like journaling and writing things down, capturing it all. I knew some of the things I was going to do in the morning. I knew some of the things I was going to do in the evening to unwind. So I overthought that, all of that intensely, and it was super helpful. That helped me be at my best, to have the energy to get out of my head and focus on other people and having a good connection. Apropos of getting some space, who even says apropos? I know I'm being pretentious, nevertheless, pretentious I shall remain. So apropos of getting some space, one of my most profound experience that I turned into a video was the second day when I was putting everything together. That is when I had my vision of the next me. I even made a video about that. So go ahead and check out that video if you're interested, about how to be the best you, how to clearly visualize who the next best version of you is, and not next best as in like previous to your current best, but like the best that comes next, the person that can do things that you can't do and gets results that you don't. So anyway, that is all to say, creating space, especially if you're an introvert overthinker, if you have anxiety, that can be really pivotal, especially after the conference, to put it all together before you return to your normal busy life that's all crazy and get distracted from what it is you learned at the conference and who it is you made connections to at the conference. So along those similar lines, right? Planning on your overthinking or your introversion or your social anxiety and building in space to deal with that, right? That's allowing yourself time to recover and achieve a better state. In addition to that, don't try to be normal. Don't just do what everyone else is doing. So that first day when I arrived in Vegas for my conference, it was a conference for growing your brand with video. I was at the airport and I was hours ahead of checkout time, and I could have just called an Uber and or figured out the bus routine. There's like 3 buses that I would have to take for like a ridiculous amount of money, according to one online planner. It was like $18 for bus fare or something ridiculous. But I could have done it. It would have been cheaper than Uber, taken a little longer, whatever. But then I had a crazy idea. What if I walked the 12 miles from the airport to the resort? And immediately I thought, like, oh, that's crazy. Like, why would I do that? How do you even walk out of an airport? They don't really design airports for people to walk out of. So all I could see looking around me was just like overpasses without sidewalks on them. And so, my first thought was like, no, I shouldn't do that. I was censoring myself. I was trying to be more normal, like, don't be so weird. But then I thought about it. Well, what would I get from that? Well, it would be hard, but then I would have gone into this conference just showing myself that I have discipline, willpower, that showing a personal strength that would have given me a little bit more confidence. And actually, to be honest, since I am a walking laboratory of weird habits, one of the things I was doing is intermittent fasting. So I was kind of curious as not only could I walk 12 miles, but could I walk 12 miles while still fasting? I hadn't eaten anything yet. I arrived in the morning. Of course, I would drink a ton of water. I would apply sunscreens twice and still get burnt. I would try and take care of myself, but like, could I do that? And I actually discovered that, yeah, I wasn't really hungry until I got to the hotel room and stopped moving. And then I could feel that I was kind of the slightly weak hungry that like, yeah, I should definitely eat something now before I crash, right? So I answered that question. But how this really impacted me is in a couple different ways. So the first third of it, where I'm just walking out of the airport and like walking down the Vegas Strip and seeing the fancy hotels, it was really fun. I was enjoying, one, just putting some of my worries from home behind me. I think that was probably the biggest thing. But 2, being in a new space and taking the ambiance. I was enjoying the fact that it's early enough in the morning that like it was on a Sunday, that there's not a lot of people walking the streets on Vegas. But strangely enough, one of the cars driving by the road I noticed there was like someone sticking a hand out of the car, like a high five hand. And so I tried to quickly stumble and high five. I missed, but then turned around and waved at the person who, leaned out of the car a little bit, waved to me. But then I realized in retrospect, I must have looked like I was having so much fun that someone just wanted to give me a high five. Or who knows, maybe it was completely unrelated to me. But I had that fun, crazy experience that I will come back to that helped me in my conference, right? That was kind of a confidence booster. It was like, oh yeah, like I can enjoy myself and be outgoing in weird ways. Of course, after you pass the welcome to Vegas sign and it's just like miles, I don't know, like 9 miles of asphalt and bright sunlight and nothing else. The walk was a lot less exciting, around 5 miles or 5.5 miles, not quite halfway there. My feet started hurting and they hurt every step later. So it was intense, right? I had this really gritty, visceral experience that was difficult. I was walking super slow by the end. And to be honest, I was limping a little bit through the conference, which people picked out occasionally, not when I was like walking in the midst of a lot of other people, but if I was walking, I tried to mosey as best I could and kind of roll with it, but people picked up on the limp. But you know what? That was a fun conversation starter, right? When I could tell people that I'd walked the 12 miles from the airport. When you're planning for a conference, you don't have to be normal. Be yourself. Do the things that you want to do, even if it's idiosyncratic. That will actually help you make more authentic and deeper connections at the conference. When you're overthinking your conference, that was a little bit more of a spur of the moment thought. but you could plan this into it. Do something that's you, and it doesn't have to be weird, although it will be more attention grabbing to other people when you tell a story. But just have a real experience, and especially like something that's you, like do it in the real world. I think there's a huge benefit to having that experience, like whether it's a nature hike, whether it's window shopping, whether it's whatever, even if it's reading a book outside, right? Let yourself have an experience in the real world that is authentically you, and that will boost your confidence, boost your relaxation level. And I'll show you in another tip how you can take that into the conference to have a more relaxed and happier state, even in the very overwhelming moments when you're trying to figure out who to talk to. So I promised I would tell you how that high five moment helps me in the conference. Well, one of the things that I was worried about was how to be my best, most relaxed self at the conference, right? So there's this catch-22 that I was going through in my head. I should visualize myself being comfortable and happy at the conference, right? Wait a sec. How do I visualize myself being calm and happy at the conference if I've always been stressed at conferences? Like, I don't know what natural outgoing Alec looks like at a conference even. Now, I know that doesn't always come across to people because I enjoy talking to people. So like when I do talk to someone, I really enjoy that conversation. But I also know that if I'm in my head stressed out, that conversation is not going to be quite as deep. I won't connect as deeply with other people. And plus, it'll just be harder for me. And I wanted to visualize this. I know visualization is powerful. Like, it's literally so powerful. They've done tests of people practicing shooting 3-point shots in basketball and people who just visualize themselves shooting 3-point shots in basketball. And it actually turns out the people who visualized did just about as good as the people who actually practiced it. Like, visualization can be that powerful. But if you're an overthinker or if you have social anxiety, then how do you even visualize being natural at a party and then, or a networking event or a conference? And that's when I realized, oh, well, why don't I take a positive interaction that I just had and visualize the party and just juxtapose the two. So instead of like overthinking, like, all right, I'm gonna smile exactly this way when I see people and I ask exactly this question, right? Which is what your overthinking mind wants to do. It wants to control the situation by calculating all the variables. Instead, I took a slightly different approach to visualization. I just visualized a context where I would be milling around, figuring out who to talk to, and then I'd visualize the situation where someone gave me the high five because I looked like I was just having so much fun they wanted to give me a high five, or maybe they're just fun, exciting people and I might meet more fun, exciting people like that at the party, right? So I just visualized those two and kind of like juxtaposed them, brought them together, in my head, and that helped. And when I had a moment at the conference when I was trying to think about, all right, who to talk to, I started getting overthinking in my head. I just went back to the high five moment and like naturally smiled more, relaxed a bit. I'm like, all right, high five moment. I'm high five Alec. I'm open to, whatever crazy and fun thing or normal and fun thing, or even like whatever regular thing happens, right? I'm ready to high five it all. And that helps me. So there are definitely some times where I could feel physically that I had slumped, that because I was overthinking, I had my serious face on and I smiled and relaxed. And I think that helped. And I think that made other people more comfortable to come and talk with me about things like my pins. So yet another overthinking tip, think about what visualization you want to bring into the conference. And again, if you have a hard time visualizing specifically what it looks like, what the happy, confident, not overstimulated, not anxious you looks like at the party, then just imagine yourself in a group of people and imagine another time where you felt happy, confident, relaxed, etc. And just go there. And when you're at the conference, party, networking, whatever, right? Just go to that happy place occasionally, right? In between passing periods or right before you have to talk to people or whatever it is, right? Go there and then feel the relaxation in your body. So Another thing to overthink before the conference and have in place is, what is your energy routine going to look like? Chances are, if you are traveling, right, it may or may not be in your time zone, or it may be in a hotel where you don't sleep as well as you do in your comfy home bed, etc. So you're probably not going to sleep as well, and you're probably going to be tired. Well, what are you going to do about that? Because the more tired you are, the more overwhelming all the stimulation will be, and the harder it will be to have happy, relaxed conversations, networking, and building connections with other people. And so specifically what this looked like for me, a lot of that was in my morning routine. So I live in Austin, Texas, and the conference was in Las Vegas. So it was 2 time zones earlier. So instead of waking up at 6 o'clock, or I guess 6:15, 6:20, I woke up at 4:13 or 4:20, super early, and I was tired. However, I do have my energy habits dialed in. So I know what things I can do in the morning to get me more energy. And it looked like 3 things. Like, one, go out at a reasonable time, like 6 or 6:30, outside to get sunlight. And your eyes picking up all of that natural sunlight will help you wake up, right? It'll give you a shot of cortisol, which is not just a stress chemical, it's a wake up and focus chemical, right? And that will help you set your circadian rhythm for the day. The other thing I did is Wim Hof breathing exercises, which I find not only wake me up right then, but they tend to take the edge off the afternoon lull, even like 6 to 8 hours later. So I would do that. I think I followed that up with a little yoga, which can also help me wake up. But then the third thing that really helps me wake up was VR boxing, because like it's an intense aerobic exercise. And I brought my headset with me since I'm a nerd, and because I wanted to talk to people about VR. And so I did some VR boxing. And when I did that, even though I'd woken up at 4 a.m., I was ready for a full day. Those are all habits that I had because I'd experimented with them beforehand. So if you're not familiar with what habits make a difference, I do suggest at least the getting outside at like 6 or 7 a.m. and taking in the natural sunlight with your eyes. That is pretty much biologically hardwired into everybody, and it doesn't require any special skill or research. But if you can find out ahead of time the types of exercise that help you not only wake up in the morning, but keep your energy up throughout the day, then go ahead and use those or experiment to find those habits. And it is really worth it to keep those up to stay on point during the conference, because they will combat stress. They will help you be alert and present in the moment, which will make it easier and less anxiety inducing to do your networking and connecting with other people. So that is 7 ways that I beat my social anxiety and my overthinking at a conference. Now, again, the trick is to overthink ahead of time, point that overthinking at something positive, and plan actions that will take you out of your head during the party, the conference, the networking event, etc. So, for example, instead of thinking about what could go wrong or what has gone wrong in the past, I thought about how could I make it easier to talk to people, came up with the pins, and that was a fantastic habit. It was super effective for me, but it was also a service to other people who were looking for someone to talk to. I noticed a couple people who felt very relieved that they had basically a standing invitation to come talk to me, and they knew what to talk to me about. I think that was part of the reason why people came up to me. And so you can use your overthinking for good. People have a negativity bias. Our overthinking is just the ability to think deeply and thoroughly about a topic, which is a gift. Unfortunately, since humans have a negativity bias, we tend to focus on the negative. So if you're not in control, if you're not focusing intentionally your overthinking, you're going to think about what could go wrong or what has gone wrong or how uncomfortable it's going to be or how stressful it's going to be, right? You might be thinking about all of those things or all the things you want to get done that you're probably not going to get done, right? If you move out of that headspace and just think, well, what could I do to make this a little bit better for me and for other people, right? And you pair that with action, right? What you're planning is not everything you're going to say. It's not like a chess game. It's not, trying to compute everything. It's just, what are simple actions that I can do where I can focus on the action and not the overthinking what to do, who to talk to, etc. If this has been helpful for you, please like and subscribe. Also throw a comment down below with any questions that you have or your own networking tips for other overthinkers and people with social anxiety, I would love to hear it. And of course, as always, make big changes, one small habit at a time. All right, full confession, I think there are like 7 examples that I shared, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'm gonna do a few takes. All right, those are 8. Excuse me. Those are 8 techniques that I use to smash my social anxiety and overthinking at the conference. Those are 6 techniques I use to smash my social anxiety and overthinking at the conference. I'm pretty sure there's more than 5, but should I go to 5? Let's do 5. All right. Those are 5 techniques I used to smash my overthinking at the conference and reduce my social anxiety. I'm gonna have a lot of fun editing this one. All right, well, yeah. I'll pick the correct one out and slide that one back into the video.